Well, good morning, and I am so happy to be here again because I just love doing podcasts. They're just such good fun because I get to have deeper dive conversations with people who I want to have deeper dive conversations with, and that makes me a very lucky girl. And today, I'm joined with um, Elly Chapple.
Morning, Lisa.
Hello. So lovely to see you. You'll have to excuse the background today because I do like to put these posts up on YouTube, but it was a job finding somewhere cool enough to sit for a long period of time. So we have like this quite strange backdrop behind me. So we're just going to have to run with that. But Elly Chapple. So some people who are watching might know you by the hashtag flip the narrative. This has been your big baby. And I'm just going to go straight in and I'm going to get us to talk about what happened the other weekend because you, Elly Chapple, did a TEDx talk, didn't you?
Yes, I did at Norwich. It was completely, I still can't get my head around it actually. I was thinking about it yesterday. It hasn't sunk in at all. And it was an amazing experience. Amazing. Have
Why,
to.
why did you want to do a TEDx talk? I mean, I know lots of people do want to do them. What was it that kind of really drove you and motivated you to want to do that?
Because I am ridiculously passionate about changing the way children like my daughter are viewed, and I thought there's no bigger stage to get it on and to have the chance to speak for them, I hope, than a TEDx. And if you then have a video that can be shared on and you hit the right note, hopefully, then surely you can shape change. So I just thought I'm going to throw my hat into the ring, and if I get in, I get in. If I don't, I don't.
I think that sounds like the best reason ever. And I did watch the video, and I certainly think you hit the note. I really do.
Thank you.
Um, so we have our paths have crossed a few times. So we are going to look at what Let's have a talk about who Elly is and how you arrived in a place that we are today, which is having a podcast. Having only met, I think we've met once. We shared a stage at a conference we were speaking at, but we've been connected on Twitter for quite a long time. So, how have our paths crossed? I mean, how did we get connected?
I'm going to say, I think probably when I started on Twitter, I was looking not just at education, but at mental health. Trauma really interested me, and social care, because they're all involved in my daughter's life and her plan for her life. So I was looking at the people on Twitter, and I think Jane Evans was one of the first people I connected. I noticed you, and then Karen, and these were the names that were coming up in the trauma field, which I was very new to at the time. And I think I was very interested because I believe for a long time Ella had PTSD. Still do think she does. But because she's disabled, it's not acknowledged very much, trauma in her life, or it's kind of dismissed as part of her condition, which I don't believe it is. I think it was an additional thing on top. So I think that's where I kind of found you, and I saw lots of posts around mental health or trauma, and the fact you did some traveling, I think, in India, and I was really interested. I go with my interest. I go with, I think, looking for the authentic voices and trying to connect in, and when it feels right, it's a good connection. There's no real plan to it.
No, I always say that. There's not really been a lot of strategy to my life. I kind of just follow my heart. But you've kind of followed Ella's heart. Now, for people who don't know you, so Ella's your daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Ella?
Yeah, she's nearly 13 now. Can't believe I'll have a teenager in October. But she's an incredible girl. I don't really know how to put her into a sentence. She's just amazing, and I think every day I am sort of more amazed. But I think what it is with Ella is she's the person I've met in my life who's got the most ability to be in the present all the time. She's never in the past, she's not in the future, she's just dealing with the now, and she's incredibly mindful, and that's what I think she teaches me the most about, is how to stay in the moment, because she doesn't do anything else, and she's very honest, really authentic, like loads of children like her. She doesn't sort of carry all the baggage we have, and she's got a phenomenal sense of humour. She's incredibly cheeky at the moment. I'm the kind of person, she's like, yeah, can you just move on? So typical sort of teenage, nice to see you, mum, see you later. Yeah, she's deafblind. I always sort of add that on at the end, otherwise we just talk about disability, talk about her first. She was born deafblind, but she had vision enough to be incredibly independent, so she did everything when she was little, like any toddler did. And she lost her vision when she was 7, which was really sad. And she'd been through a lot by then medically, but that was sort of a big shift in all of our lives. So yeah, she's amazing. I've got 3 children. She's the eldest, and my other 2 are completely different individuals again.
Yes, and it sounds like when you talk about Ella, it almost sounds to me like you really encompass that our children are our greatest teacher.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, I think she teaches me every day, and the people who work with her say that she's changed their lives, because she demands you to be mindful and present, which is exhausting and very hard for us when we've got these really busy lives. But when you're needing to go at a pace like Ella, that is this pace, I cannot do your pace because I can't learn, I can't be, so you need to come back to mine. The shift for us is very difficult, but they've gone away and I think said working with their own children is very different now. And the way they've recognized people in their community, they've got more capacity, compassion, patience, because she does, there is no other way she can be. So we have to join her at her level. And I think I always say, you don't bother going to a yoga class, spend the day with my daughter. You'll certainly learn how to be very present.
Yeah, and I really hear that. I really hear that kind of grounding presence. And regardless of who we are, we all need a bit of that, don't we? We all need a bit of grounding presence. So what Ella's really taken on a bit of a campaign, I think. And do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've come across, what things have happened that have led you to become, really, we might call you, Ellie, a bit of an activist?
Yes, okay. I think I don't know what to say to that. Yeah, it's led me to a point where I think I needed to channel what we'd learned with Ella somewhere, because it felt it couldn't just stay with us. It was going to be a waste of energy, and we needed to share it, because there are just hundreds and thousands of these children and families who really need us to see them and see them differently. So I thought, well, if we take everything we've got or what we've learned from Ella and share the story initially, and then share the things we've tried that have worked, and share what we do with our Lauras, which is what we call our team, then it might just help somebody else. It might be the difference between a child ending up at crisis like my daughter did and a child not, and also giving some support. I've spoken to lots of parents who have just reached out and sort of needed someone to say, believe in yourself, trust in your child. You are right. That instinct you get, that's right, by the way. So don't be pushed around, try and get the experts to really listen to you, try and work with people. I think it became a real sort of, for me, a real passion to change the whole conversation around how we approach difference, any kind of difference, and that we stop fearing it, and that we learn to trust each other again as humans, and have cut each other some slack. I think we're so bound by the test and the must do this and must look like this and must be like this, and everybody's sort of drowning. And it was kind of like, can we just stop and just like start over? And actually my child is a brilliant example of how we should be. And the reason for that is she can only operate in a certain way, but it's actually really beneficial for all of us. And I think that's what difference brings, is it makes you behave differently, because you have to change. Running on the treadmill, you can't do that. You have to change your gear. You have to think about things differently. You have to be broader minded. You have to sort of really look and look again. And it's all the observation as well that we, I don't know if we observe our fellow humans enough. And being with somebody like Ella, we have to watch everything and we have to really think about it, because often she won't give you the words or she won't give you a sign. She'll just invite you to observe. And then you need to sort of unpick what that is. So all of it sort of stretching the way we think and really testing out some of the belief systems we hold, I think. And I think we've got to a point in education where maybe we're ready for a shift. For lots of reasons, trauma, for the fact that we should be relational instead of operating in different ways with regards to behaviour, and things like that.
It's the square peg and round hole thing, isn't it? And I think what's really changed and what's really become very problematic is that the space by which you can express any difference has got smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we end up with this notion and this idea that there is a normal around which we all operate and we're trying to get to. And many of us wouldn't arrive in that space. We just would, not be able to arrive in that space. And for children, that is doubly devastating because of the stages of development that children are undergoing, and because education is compulsory, and because education is important, and because socialising and play and all those wonderful, fantastic things that are supposed to take place within the education system mean that lots of children who can't fit into that round hole experience exclusion with a big E and with a little e, and the impact of that on the human. So for me, the messages that you convey are vitally important for everybody. How do we create, and you'll have perhaps heard the podcast I did with Mark Goodwin, and we talked a lot about this, does society create is a reflection of education, or is education an opportunity? Does it reflect society? How can we utilize education in a way that actually means we create better communities that are more compassionate, connected, inclusive? How do we go about that? And there's a spectrum upon which schools sit, and some schools do that very well and some don't.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I would say, is cultural, and it's about the people. And I think a lot of it is sometimes giving people permission. I think when I've done sort of some of the conferences in the last year, some of the slides that were the most sort of captured were things like, it's okay to make a mistake. Children do it all the time. It was the thing, I was just really kind of like shocked. Do you need permission for that? You are allowed to completely screw up, by the way. You are human. And I do it every day, at least 53 times in the day, like just fall, because I'm trying to do things differently and trying to butt up against a system that doesn't work. So I'm going to fall over. But as long as you're Weeble-like and you stand up again, you're fine. So it was just really surprising to me that some of the staff felt so. I just thought, what's happening to morale? What's happening to these people's inner strength if they're feeling that they can't even make a mistake? And that's essential with children like my daughter. Maybe why it's more difficult for some to have them in a classroom is this fear of not getting it right. But pushing them out and segregating them is much worse than making a mistake or working with the family. And I think it's those relationships, like having the relationship with the parents isn't a bad thing, because they will be your sort of marker and guide if you're not sure. And it's developing sort of all of that. It's just human stuff, isn't it? It's conversations in a different way. And I think we've got this idea of complexity that's sort of overshadowing everything, like the medicalization and the legalization and the narratives that are abounding, which making children like my daughter very complicated, and they're not. They're not.
But who teaches us how to be human? I mean, you know, if you break it down, where do we actually learn how to be human? And I guess that's going to be in the context of being around adults who are happy being vulnerable, happy being empathic, happy with understanding that getting something wrong is what learning is. You know, I mean, I wouldn't even say calling it a mistake. It's actually the process of getting better, of learning, of improvement. So hypercritical about that. And so where are we learning how to be a human being? And I guess these are the kind of, these are quite deep philosophical questions, aren't they? You know, what does it mean to be human, and where are we learning how to do that? And what kind of qualities are we enhancing in the kind of society that we are currently living in? You know, what are we feeding? What bear are we feeding? You know, are we feeding the compassionate, caring, empathic, growing, learning?
I think there's a lot of people who are, and then there's this sort of false lens, this narrative that's just rubbish, really, that we should be perfect and everything should happen in 2 minutes, and, you know, instant gratification, and, you know, don't work for it, just ask for it, and all this stuff that's just rubbish, really. And I think our children in particular, the ones like my daughter who I've come across, are the people who actually stop you in your tracks, or children in general, and sort of still ask the questions, and you think, whoa, okay, yeah, actually, it isn't about that. It's about what you just said, which just is very, very simple, but actually blew my mind for 2 minutes, because I remembered that being human is not all of that stuff. It's what you just said, which was, how does this come out of the earth, or how do I do that, or how can I get from A to B, or why does the sun shine, you know, for 12 hours? And all these things that we become too busy for are actually the center of what we've always been, which is discovery, curiosity. What are we about? How do we fit together? And how are we going to be together with all difference amongst us? And I don't see it as, maybe it was my upbringing. I don't have any issue with it, and I find it difficult to understand why we've got so far away from it in some ways. And then you meet amazing people who are doing it really well.
But I think one of the great challenges is, how do we understand each other better? I mean, I think that is, you know, when we see something as common sense, you can bet your life there's someone else who believes the opposite and sees that as common sense, and that the act of having conversations has actually become harder and harder. I mean, as an example, I upset somebody on Twitter who had sent me something that I didn't want to read because it was triggering, and I asked them, why are you sending it to me? I'm not sure where you want me to go with this. And he wrote to me and said that I had upset him and offended him, and I wrote back, and I just kind of said, you know, I'm really, really sorry that that's happened, but I also need you to think in this context about when you're sending something out, you obviously have a view about how it should be received, what kind of context it sits in is lacking. And I haven't had a response to my apology. And I think that to me is kind of a symptom of the way we communicate on social media, which has no context, no nuance, no eye contact, no, I see you, I see your vulnerability, I see that you're struggling with something, and let's meet in that space of connection. And I think that's part of the problem, is how we actually share the way we feel about something. It's become a very strange, difficult space that's full of shouty opinion.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's lots of positives with things like Twitter, but I think I'm always very mindful it's an incredibly public space, and if you're going to say something, be prepared to stand in court and say the same thing, because it's out there then, isn't it? I found it very difficult at first. I think now I sort of worked it out a bit more, though sometimes I just think I don't know how to do this.
You are prolific on Twitter, Ellie. You are such a Twitterer.
To try and share messages on or anything like that. But I think for personal conversations, direct messaging or meeting people, conferences when I like human connection. I love it. I like to be with people in a space. I like to be able to read, as you say, what their body's saying, how they feel. You can feel it, and you need to be connected in. And working with Ella has kept that very much at the front of everything I do, I think, because I'm so used to it, and it's how all of my team work. And we've got this it's what Karen Treisman calls limbic whispering. I love that. And it's like this very intense connection where it's sort of like it's just moving like that. You don't really need to do an awful lot. In fact, you don't really need a lot of words a lot of the time. So I'm much happier in that sort of space when I'm with people, and getting used to the social media. I do social media because I know you need to sort of share wider. You can't just have conversations locally anymore. I think you should be able to. If we could grow our local a bit more and have a bit more of a community conversation, maybe we wouldn't need that so much.
Yeah, and just kind of bringing that back to Ella, you know, that kind of deep listening, that hearing where a person is. I mean, from listening to your TED talk, I mean, the big crisis for Ella was that actually nobody was listening to her. Do you want to talk a bit about what happened that kind of really jolted you into really the space that you're in now?
Well, I think after we sort of, realised she'd gone blind, and she had 5 operations back to back to try and save her sight, which was just really traumatic because, when you do a retinal reattachment, your eyes are really swollen. So it was very difficult. And I just kind of wanted it to finish because I just thought we're giving her too much to deal with again. This had happened during chemo. There was a point where actually for Ella, it was enough. And I had to say, finish early because we're going to kill her. Too much chemo, it's not blanket protocol. She's had enough, I can tell. And it was the same with the operations. And I was kind of relieved by the 5th one when they said, I'm really sorry, there's nothing we can do. I just thought, well, at least it's over now. At least we can actually start the healing because she's had so much. I'm really worried about where she is in a space. And for the first 6 months, she just rocked backwards and forwards like that on the mat and just made this like, and that's all she did all day. And I thought about, is it Bruce Perry's when he talks, so is it about the somatic sensory, when the rhythm creates, it helps heal the brain. So she kind of knew what to do even then, how to bring herself back to the point of how am I going to start again. And because she's so good at following her body and what it's telling her, and that's all she listens to, we have to become very good at observing and listening to her and trusting that she knows what's right, because we're in situations with Ella where none of us have ever been in them before. So there's no kind of manual to it or sheet of explanation. We have to literally follow her. And I remember just sort of creating this protected space. Nobody was allowed in. She wouldn't leave the house. And after 6 months, she started to open up again. It was like the intense part of the trauma. And I think I just became committed I sold my business. I just said to my husband, one of us needs to be at home full time. It's going to have to be me. And I just got rid of the business and just put all of that knowledge in business, as it were, into how am I going to create this structure around her, and who are the people that I need. And it's taken 5 years because we've gone through various different models to get to the right one. It's all been a big learning curve. And the team we've got now, she calls them all Laura. They're all Lauras. Lauras are amazing. Lauras are the authentic human being that we all need in our life. And even the guy, my team manager's a guy, and she calls him Laura with a deep voice, Laura. So she's hilarious. She's just got this amazing, like, I just find her fascinating. Do you know what I mean? I know she's my daughter, but I'm like, wow, it's really interesting how you look at things. So, and because it's become a big culture in our house now, which is effectively a school for one, and we've got all these people there all the time, it's just our culture, it's just what we do, and it's how we view the world, and it's people join in, and there's a guy come from the local gym who's working on her sort of wellness program, and he said to me, she changed my life. I adore her, absolutely adore her. I look forward to seeing her every week. This is like the light. And I'm like, how does she do this to people? Like, she just lights them up. And I think it's because she's just who she is all the time. She's very consistent. She's completely authentic. And people really like it. Like, there's a need for it. There's a need for just being who you are and accepting people where they are. And she's just very kind with it. She doesn't sort of put it upon you, but she's just consistently the same. And eventually people are drawn in and just think, actually, I'd like that in my life. I'd like to be more like, how does Ella do that? I need to be more like, I need to be calm. We can do 3 things today, not 23. And it's things like that where, you know, you break it down and you sort of flip it round and think, we do know how to do this. It's interesting that a 12-and-a-half-year-old's teaching me, but she is, and because of that, my other children are probably, their levels of empathy are phenomenal for other human beings. And I've not taught them, I've not sat and specifically said, they've just watched and observed and become very aware of other people. They know when someone's in distress, they know when somebody needs help. I've got a lot of faith in the generations coming through. I think they will be different. I think they will change everything.
Well, I've just finished reading The War on Empathy, and yeah, it's a really good book. It's very easy to read. It's a little bit of that whole. I've just put it in a blog post actually on 5 must reads over the summer. But you know, it's a psychology-based book, and it talks very much about how we develop and learn empathy. And, you know, much like resilience, it's something we learn. It's something we learn in relationships. It's something we learn in community and in society. And the key is really how we nudge people into developing empathy. And it sounds like Ella kind of doesn't just nudge her sisters, you know, she's kind of jolting them in that empathy growth, which is something that we, you know, we have a real challenge with, actually, the growth of empathy, and empathy as a skill, as a necessary survival strategy, really, because empathy is what supports us connecting with one another, and connection is you know, arguably the thing that keeps us alive, isn't it?
It is. I do believe that. I think it's like oxygen. It's like utterly necessary. I think if Ella didn't have the connection she has, and you know, I don't think she'd see the point. So you know, her working with, and the way she's connected in, the fact that she knows she's got this very deep level connection, which is like on a limbic level, which Jan van Dijk, who's a phenomenal guy who passed away, one of the professors in deaf blindness, and amazing man who I contacted when we first left education and came home. And he was saying, you know, the limbic resonance is a real thing with deafblind children, he was talking about, because they don't have the vision, they don't have the hearing, and so they use other things to connect. And one of the things that he'd noticed the most was the connection between the sort of the, whether it's an intervener or the parent and the child, because you're not using sight and vision, hearing, you're using sometimes words, you might be using signs, but actually you're just resonating together to give that child enough confidence to feel it's okay to be in the world, because it's extremely stressful when you've got your major primary senses impacted on. And he was a big believer in that limbic resonance. And I just it always stayed with me, because I just thought that's kind of the thing, that's the little pocketed thing. If I could bottle it and say, this is what you need, like, it just makes you feel good. And she shares it really well, but she's also she's very driven. She's incredibly driven and motivated. She's just got a lot of balance in her life, that she's made it, it can be like this, but it also has to be like this. So there's a lot to learn from people like her, I think. And there's of these people who we would say have perceived differences, but actually the way they live teaches us an awful lot about how we need to be. So it's that, really. I think it's looking at the whole of all of us and thinking we need bits from everything, and it's finding the balance in the middle. And I do think it's completely possible. But maybe I live in a very positive space with a very positive culture, but I would like it to sort of widen out, because it's worked.
Yeah. So in terms of your kind of key messages, that you would like to convey, I mean, I can hear them shining through, but just so that to bring us to a conclusion, to sort of, as we come to the end of the podcast, what are your key messages, really? What is it, if we say be the change you want to see, what do you want people to be to create that change? What is it that you're really fighting for?
I just want people to dare to be who they really are and actually accept others at the same point. And if you're authentic and open and empathic, you'll be surprised at the response back. Because if you dare to do it, you give the permission to the other person to come back that way. If I'm really kind to somebody or empathic, they do not come at me with a negative. You get a different response. I think it's believing enough that being that way is more powerful than being the other way, which is fear-driven and sort of deficit-driven, because we're in that protective, don't come at me defensive state. But the way Ella is, the very open, this is me, this is who I am, I accept you for you, if you accept me for me, then we can move forwards. It's so simple, it's so human, and it's really doable. It just takes shifting the view slightly, and humans can change their mind in seconds. It's one of our greatest skills. We can literally change our minds in a second. So it's not like we just have to say, deep breath, I'm going to do it, and actually then practice it consistently and be more open and more of an observer and less of a, doing with rather than doing to or for is kind of one of our mantras, rather than trying to control and you must do it, which is all very much, what are you so worried about? Why are you so uptight about this? Do it in a more let's see where we can go with this, because we know that's going to be difficult for you. So let's see where you take us. And it's all that voyage of discovery and curiosity. And I think years ago in education, we had a lot more of it, probably because teachers didn't have quite such a suppression of their agency. Parents weren't quite so pitted against education. There's all this arguing going on, but it needs to stop. And people need to, once they join up, there'll be a much more powerful voice there to say, actually, do you know what? We'd like it to change, please. We need it to be different, and we're prepared to trust and work together.
Yeah.
That's what
and that day is coming. I know it is. And I think that's a fantastic place to leave us, because it's all my passions, empathy, vulnerability, connection, authenticity, meeting people where they are, and being forgiving when people get it wrong, and when people make mistakes, and when meeting that with the compassion and the humility to recognize that I get it wrong a lot. So if I can be compassionate with myself, then it's a lot easier for me to recognize and be compassionate when other people get it wrong.
Absolutely.
Elly Chapple, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And
very much, Lisa.
I wish you an absolutely beautiful day, and I will speak to you soon.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.